Tashile, warm greetings, friends. I'm Drakpa. Today, I'm really kind of excited to do something that's really fresh, it's like the leading, kind of bursting edge of my own heart and mind. And it's this kind of mutual uplift. So first, kind of always reestablish a motivation, bodhicitta, heart, mind of enlightenment, kind of really actively, kind of in tender-hearted, kind of courageous way. Have the motivation. By doing this, I'm reflecting on this, kind of applying this in our experience. May every single being be free of suffering and the causes of suffering, and may they have happiness and the causes of happiness right now. So this general approach of uplift is related with, in Ken Wilber terms, which a lot of people aren't familiar with, he has these distilled ways of condensing a lot of knowledge into simple, elegant heuristics or rules of thumb. And arguably even more impactful and profound than these elegant equations like E equals mc squared. Wilber's contribution, AQAL, will probably actually be more profound in terms of the fullness of the richness of reality that it includes. AQAL, which is short for all quadrants, all lines, and that's short for all stages, states, types, lines, quadrants, and then shadows. These are 5 or 6 general orientations that if we kind of at least pay attention to and highlight them at least quickly in our experience, we'll include a lot of cause, condition, and effect or interdependence that needs to be included to have a full enough perspective of reality to really honor and appreciate like what's part of a moving aspect of experience. So this first one, in terms of the ups, the uplifts, is stages or layers, levels sometimes, but this kind of ways things unfold and enfold each other, like in developmental sequences. And this is related to growing up. So anything that goes through a developmental sequence, like a tree going from an acorn to becoming a big oak, or a baby being born small and gradually developing its body and then having higher level cognition and mobility and then getting older and eventually dying. These are developmental sequences that follow like relational time and space. And we're just general growing or maturing or developing. The Buddhist, stages of the path, the 5 paths, or the 10 bhumis, or the 4 Vidyadhara levels. These are stages or layers. The 9 yana system is an internested layered system, if we look at it this way, as a developmental unfolding, where the sub or the foundational layer becomes the heart or like kind of the deeper structure, deeper tissue of the larger emergent layering. And so this is growing up. So we need to include some kind of a layering process of a developmental sequence of a lot of what we experience. So growing up. The second's waking up. Waking up is related to states of mind, states of awareness, like awake, dreaming, or deep sleep. They could be related to moods or certain emotional kind of atmospheres that we're in, certain cognitive ways of functioning. These are all kind of states of awareness or waking up. And eventually, like in Buddhism, we get into these 2 truth modality of relative truth and absolute truth. And absolute truth is kind of this liberative aspect taught in Buddhism. And that's where we're abiding in the emptiness nature, or the totally free or empty of all fixation, all unrealistic holding patterns. And so we're non-fixated, we're non-reifying, and we're actually immersively interdependent with lived experience outside, inside, and in between. And this is kind of a waking up experience. If we're in the emptiness awareness, that's a type of awareness, and it's actually liberative, meaning it includes the rich, textured relational fullness of experience, but doesn't hook onto or get sticky with any specific aspect of a dynamic moving system that has to be allowed to move dynamically in order to stay alive. So this is related to waking up. And then we have cleaning up, which we're these multifaceted beings, and we have all these layers of different aspects of ourselves. And some we can be not aware of at all, or intentionally kind of really scared of, unconsciously scared of, or just like fearful of. And we have these aspects of ourselves they're not familiar to us, they're kind of uncomfortable when you experience them. And we start to, if we don't put more highlighted attention, they become this kind of so-called shadow material, where it becomes this other. Well, this natural part of ourself, we kind of other it. and we're doing that internally. And if that gets more dense and more literal, we can actually have that part of ourselves we're not comfortable being with or learning from or relating to. We can other it and kind of project it outwardly as this externalized other. And this causes like a lot of the frictional warring fighting that we have, a lot of the ways that we other beings or other perspectives, that we other them as if they're bad or not as good, or in the sense, they're this unnatural aspect, they're this othered aspect. It's actually related a lot of the time to aspects of ourselves we're not yet comfortable kind of relating to. And so we kind of create this unconscious material. And so cleaning up is becoming aware of more of the ways in which we are, and like developing kind of more of a relationship, a familiarity, a friendship, kind of a naturalness with these different textures of ourself. So that's this cleaning up practice. And then there's another one called opening up, or sometimes showing up. It's that related to this idea of multiple intelligences. We all have these different ways of being that we can be better or worse at. We can be good at cooking or music, or running fast, or interpersonal skills, emotional conscious intelligence, logic, analytic ways of understanding things. These are relatively independent lines or multiple intelligences, and when we more fully embrace more of these lines or these different trajectories or ways of being, that's more like fully showing up with a greater range or a greater plurality or multiplicity of these different contoured abilities or aspects of ourself. And those lines have layers, so we can grow them, we can become more conscious of them, we can allow them to start integrating with each other and becoming mutually supportive or mutually uplifting. And here's where it gets into the frothy part that I'm much more kind of like leading fresh edge of my experience, is this mutual uplift, or I think I sometimes relate to it as syncing up. So beyond Wilbur's waking up, growing up, showing up, cleaning up, is this syncing up. When we start to pay enough attention to at least these 5 general orientations of our experience: stages, states, lines, types, and quadrants. And I didn't get too much into the types and quadrants. Types are like typology systems, different ways of dancing, different ways of making sense, different ways of voicing things, different ways of being in a space. Any different typology system, astrological system, a way of kind of seeing different linear and nonlinear patterns. These are all typology systems. So we all have these different ways of, given a terrain, given an atmosphere, given a world space, we have different ways of moving through them, navigating them, making sense of them. So these are different voices of different types, different typologies, and we all have these. And then quadrants is, to say it quickly, this interior, subjective, and exterior, objective ways of being, like personally, like as an individual, and then collectively as a group. So these 4 aspects, this subjective, intersubjective, objective, and interobjective, these are quadrants, and every experience, every event has these 4 quadrants, these 4 aspects at least: an outer and an inner, both individually and collectively. So when we start to honor at least these 5 aspects of ourself deeply enough, richly enough, consciously enough, carefully enough, full of care enough, they start to commingle with each other and mutually inform one another, mutually uplift. They start to sync up. And this is where I think when we get fluid enough with our experience, and this is in Buddhist terms the middle way Madhyamaka view, where we're not holding only one part, just the one line or one layer or one kind of corner of our aspect, one talent, and we put all our energy in there, or one other that we're really scared of. When we start to loosen up these kind of certain grasping, reifying habits, we get a little more flexible, a little more flowing, consciously, like seeing what is interweaving in my experience now, and more carefully including it in a coherent way that doesn't have this extra layer of grasping or reification. At a certain point, this richness of our being, of our mind and of our heart, of our self, culture, and nature starts creatively, co-creatively intermingling with itself. It starts to naturally sync up in an auto-poetic fashion, in a auto-generating, in a self kind of undoing or self-creative mode, where we don't have to consciously, intentionally start to sync up all these aspects. It just starts to be what happens in a complex dynamical system. It's called a counteractive dynamical system, where they start to keep each other in check. If one gets exaggerated, there's others that keep it in check. If one's diminished, there's other aspects that keep it in check. And that's how like a healthy system starts to function. When enough of its parts are resourced sufficiently and cared for enough, they start to auto-poetically or sympoetically, like in sympathetic resonance, creatively create even more awesome emergent aspects or ways of being. In this, if we have this middle way Madhyamaka flex flow approach, and we're not locking into any particular quadrant level, line, state, type, aspect of ourself, because we're conscious enough, then these aspects start interweaving with each other and co-creatively kind of creating this emergence. And this is what I argue is like kind of maturing integral, or this maturing kind of Madhyamaka, which in Buddhist terms I see is more like a natural outflowing into Tantra. So once we get this innermost philosophical view of middle way Madhyamaka, that means non-reifying, non-grasping kind of clarity and like acknowledgement and allowance for kind of interdependence to be happening more fully. Then that starts to sync up these different layers, textures, lines. This kind of interweaving starts to mesh into these greater intermesh works, these greater interwoven fabric patterns, systems of systems of systems. We become these different, much more robust, interdependent beings with others in worlds. And that's where I think Tantra begins. And that's where we get this kind of like emergent sense of being with others and belonging, an emergent self-agency, an emergent type of kind of analytical, kind of like rationality informed, kind of magic rational kind of like sense making, an emergent way of like actually pluralistically being flexible and flowing with others in more greater, fuller fairness, justice, compassion. And then even a more emergent or transcendental or a more inclusive, comprehensive way of integrating further systems of systems between more types of beings, between more planets of beings. And this is all bread and butter Tantra, and I'm just quickly going through these spiral dynamic stages of specifically purple, red, orange, blue, orange, green, and integral with all its color things into these. Once you have a system syncing up with itself, you start to get an integral purple communion, an integral like red agentic like vital, powerful, skillful kind of like dignity, an integral emergent blue pattern honoring, rule following, like precision kind of like integrative mode, followed by like this even more creative metasystemic way of understanding those rules and patterns and seeing where they can shift flexibly given context dynamic shifting. And then green, a more integral plurality, like an even more multi-perspectival, more pluralistic way of going in and out of epistemologies, ontologies, and methodologies. And then an even greater layering of different ways to shapeshift in between these modalities, to literally like take on chameleon like different ways of being in bodies, being in space, using language. So this is all like straight up bodhisattva path. When Shantideva like really has the aspiration, may I be a bridge, a boat, a breeze, the medicine to heal all beings. At this point, I think it starts going beyond the limitations of the so-called pre-integral or even early integral ways of systematically seeing how quadrants, lines, levels, states, and types integrate. It starts to actually become this deeper, richer textured, kind of multifaceted, more natural, more so-called supra-mundane or city-based kinds of ways of actually being in bodies, of being able to flow with patterns. And so we get these descriptions which are often like understood in metaphor or kind of stories or myths. I think they're actually in these more subtle ways of syncing up, that they are quite literal. They are quite literal at this next layering or next level of integrated kind of capacity. This bodhisattva, 10 bodhisattva bhumis. We start to actually have capacities to expand our field of conscious attention and engagement with greater fields of attunement, of alignment, with more beings, with more lives into the future, into the past, more creative ways of knowing, higher level, more refined cognitive capacities. This is just bodhicitta functioning less interruptedly, more brightly, because the things that were blocking it up are now being reduced and eliminated as we go through these 10 bodhisattva bhumis or layers, levels, stages. And all of a sudden these siddhi, or these natural capacities previously unavailable to ourselves, start to turn on and autopoetically intertune with each other to create these like emergent capacities, which are natural capacities, but emergent, interwoven, syncing up capacities of actually being a bodhisattva with while abiding in Madhyamaka middle way. And that's when we get like this layering of tantra skillful means practice starts to become available. And that's what a lot of Tibetan Buddhism does, like creation and completion stages, or visualization and then dzogchen, or completion without characteristics practice. These are actually, performing, like using imaginal creativity to perform in this kind of like mind-body complex. Like, what is it like to have 2 arms, 4 arms, be blue, be red, be a single person, 2 people, a whole field, a retinue of people, and have the world look in certain ways, different shapes, to affect things via light. To have our ways of engaging and like bringing more supportive nutrition, benefit, love, and compassion into the world, like function through colored light. These are all Vajrayana skillful means techniques to transform food into offering, to transform a tiny little offering cup of tea into an ocean of luxurious, perfectly arrayed, sumptuous gifts, to have beings be pacified and enriched and enjoy the bodhicitta presence of their own natural goodness, Buddha nature. Like, these are just standard kind of nuts and bolts Tantra Tibetan Buddhist techniques that start to be practiced. We start to get more familiar with them in imaginal ways. And like they say, that's the benefit of Tibetan Buddhism. We use duality to undermine or release duality. So we use imaginal visualization, for example, in order to relate to relax into, to expand into, so to ease up, open up further, show up further, like to like rest up and lighten up, to sync up, to uplift more inclusively, more comprehensively, as more bodies, as more ways of knowing, as more ways of being, as more ways of simultaneously being embedded in different perspectives. Like, this is all Tantra, Tibetan Buddhism. And this is beyond Wilberian integral. And this is like been tested and practiced and embodied and accomplished for centuries by Vajrayana masters. And this is kind of what Tibetan Buddhism is pointing to. It's why I see mature integral as just being this stage, this way of layering, where at a certain point we're caring enough for these aspects of ourselves, we allow them to start syncing up where they're mutually uplifting each other, and all of a sudden these different kind of are emergent, more nuanced, more comprehensive, more full ways of being, of having a sense of greater, more inclusive sense of self, the great self, of being this internested being. Like really much more interbeing, like with interdependence much more fully. And this goes beyond the sandbox that most people are willing to play in, and that's totally fine. It's beyond the sandbox that Wilber is willing to play in, and that's fine. But the tantras and even the sutras of Buddhism, Buddha plays in this sandbox extensively, voluminously. Of the, even in the sutras, the 6 realms and the different kinds of supramundane kind of abilities that turn on, and the different types of beings and bodies and languages and histories and world systems, and like different, just like vast realms of experience that have happened. And I think at this point, all of a sudden we start seeing this isn't actually metaphor. It's not myth. The Buddha's actually pointed to these much more subtle relative truths that have been happening, that all of a sudden they come onto our radar when we're synced up enough. And not just subtle level relative truth, like all filtered through duality mind, but actually wisdom, awareness expressing itself purely as pure relative truth. It's called the union of great purity and great equality. And these are actually accomplished like Vijayadhara levels, awareness holders. And here is what introduces like what's so beautiful, upholding. So we're allowing ourselves to sync up with self and other, culture, nature. And then we're relaxing into that. We're lightening up and like relaxing and letting our intelligence and prajna and compassion like do what it does when we don't get in the way. And this causes this genuine like uplift of self and other and world. We start to become these generous fields of creative, emergent, integral cheerleading. We start to just like juicily like appreciate all these living threads of self, other, and world. And we start to just be like superfood for like, we go into a context, we like graciously, consciously, clearly like see the valuable aspects. We become supportive nutrition conditions, like secondary supportive conditions. And then we like support and ease up and just let the intelligence of that system auto-poetically like unfold itself. Nothing's forced. There's no agenda being enforced. It's all just out of loving embrace. And the Buddhas like actually realized bodhisattva bhumis, bhumi bodhisattvas, and these totally awakened, unsurpassed Buddhas like can do this like just with such pristine elegance of cause, condition, and effect. And so what happens? We begin to be an awareness holder. We're like so synced up with self, other, and world that we start becoming these fields of uplift. And in Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, it's called blessing. Lineage blessing. Living lineage transmission. Tantra is called gyu, continuity. It's this continuous stream of interlayered, interwoven fields of love, compassion, and wisdom that go back through all these lineage masters. It's what they synced up with. This is like a total superpower, a natural superpower of beings to fall in love, to sync up with. Instead of like having to learn things one by one, when we kind of are when we're in this in love mode, we like have this generous leaning into with a lot of creative curiosity and energy, a leaning into a world. That could be a person or a song or a movie. We lean into it, we turn all our sense doors brightly on, and we willingly let the world change us. We want to have a union, a greater unity, a greater interbeing with this greater world. And so this allows us to bring all these like synced up systems that are already operating, and we unfold with that, with discernment. And so instead of trying to figure out the mechanics of a world one by one, we put ourselves in a type of synced up, integrated body, speech, and mind, or stages, lines, types, quadrants, these different aspects of ourself and other and in community. Like we allow the syncing up to happen, and we like boost big time all at once. This is falling in love. And we have to do it with discernment. There's honeymoon phases where we just like kind of taking in everything, and that kind of mellows out. And then we get a little more, critically aware of like this, less kind of like extreme either or thinking. And we start to see the more gray, beautiful, messy nuance, the more spectral experience of things. And we start to let the relationality of that world like really inform us more completely, more fully or comprehensively. So this is something that Tibetan Buddhism taps into is devotion. This is the function of devotion in Tibetan Buddhism, to sync up with these larger field streams of synced up already emergent, creative, integrative, continuous streams going back into beginningless time, going forward into infinite, endless time, with like all scales of locality, of space included, all kinds of beings, all ways of knowing, these fields of generative third attractor invitation, like into these up-leveled ways of being, of mutually uplifting. Like this is the like warm invitation of the Bodhisattva way of life, and using skillfully like all these different aspects of ourselves and our experience. Like, this is the Tantra approach, the path of skillful means in union with wisdom, the wisdom of non-reifying middle way absolute truth, that way of being. And this creates all these extended emergent layers of like synced up layerings of integral purple, integral red, integral blue, integral orange, integral green, integral, integral teal and turquoise. Like, and this just keeps unfolding. And that's when we get these 10 bodhisattva bhumis, and we get these like totally out of the box, like can't even fathom how amazingly mysterious and wonderful some of these capacities are of these Buddhas, of these awakened beings. And right now, from our perspective, we think they're stories. But I think when this syncing up gets deep enough, we're like, oh shit, this is true. The world is this rich. There are these kinds of beings. Because then we start being open enough, in love enough, synced up enough, enmeshed enough to actually see on our radar, in our direct experience, oh, what the Buddha was talking about is true. What these lineage masters have been saying is true, not just metaphorically true. Metaphor is a way to get into a model imaginatively, but then we actually start feeling the lived texture of being, of these much more nuanced, integrated ways of being and doing, engaging, and becoming, like transforming according to path. And this is like the warm, open invitation of Tibetan Buddhism, or Vajrayana, this tantric path integrated with the sutra path. And then we're healing our wounds. Like, that's a sutric path, a therapeutic modality. We're actually caring for the parts that aren't fully functional, they're dysfunctional. And the tantric path is once things get functionally enough interwoven, interdependently kind of like aligned as like larger senses of healthy me, healthy awareness, that starts to be able to utilize a much wider, deeper, nuanced field of cause, condition, and effect, of relationality, and thus emerges Tantra. Is this newly emergent now? No. There have been beings doing this for eons, but it's new to me because I haven't synced up this far yet. I can cognitively, conceptually grok kind of some of this as like a map, but until I'm in a lived experience that's this integrated, it'll be new to me. Seems like it's never been done before. And that's just my own childish kind of absolutizing tendency to hold my corner of my cosmic address, my way of intermixing the quadrants and lines and layers. Like, in this present moment, I absolutize it, think no one else has done this before. I'm the only one, the first one, the worst one, whichever. And relaxing up that absolutizing kind of fervor or fundamentalism, easing up and be like, whoa, I am late to this party. But what a party it is to actually try to become a living, engaged, omni-win, continuous bodhicitta-an kind of being. An actually realized bodhisattva, who then uses, like with all these methods, these wisdom blessing streams and this ritualized like ways of using everything as a portal into complete boundless world making, like these tantric means. How amazing. We're late to the party, but I'm here now. How amazing. This is like the big fresh breeze, all tides rising, like the boat's all uplifting into this upholding vision, becoming an actual awareness holder, or a Vijaydhara in Tibetan Buddhism. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to uphold all these aspects of reality as fully, completely, comprehensively, cogently as we can. To have interdependence fully do its thing without getting in the way, with clarity and discernment, honoring all the layers, all the scales, all the scopes, all the voices, all the languages, all the bodies, and to do that without limit, boundlessly. And then in each moment of however far and deep and wide we can actually consciously participate in, to elegantly sync up with what's available, give our superfood generative, nutritive, like integral cheerleading, integral like gratitude boost, and just relax, ease up, and let reality continue autopoetically unfolding itself. This is the leading edge of integral. This is the ancient edge of Tibetan Buddhist wisdom and compassion lineage tradition. But there's a lot of ways that we can approach this, and like it's just like a very lovely, warm, super nutritious, kind of exuberant, blissful invitation to like actually, maybe I can become like this. Maybe this is actually how reality functions when enough elements of reality are cared for. Maybe uplifting like this is true. Maybe I could be an awareness holder. I could uphold the integrated enough awareness that can lovingly embrace this much richness of reality, and then skillfully, kindly, gently, carefully be with others, so that however they are, wherever they are, however they're locking into a pattern or celebrating and uplifting, emerging and creatively kind of frothing, I can be with that and just love it, and just love them, and just love myself, and just celebrate this experience we get to share together. Wow, how amazing. Really, thank you. This is kind of a little bit of a beautiful kind of loveliness that the Buddha invited us to, if we're willing to, accept the invitation and try it out for ourselves. So, warm invitation, friends. If this is helpful, hopefully so, great. If not, click on something else. Go enjoy a walk in the woods. Listen and share some time with a friend. Just next, and dedicate the merit if anything was helpful. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The precious bodhicitta, and those without it, may it be generated, and those who have it, may it never diminish, but always continue increasing. Deity, mantra, and dharmakaya are the nature of appearance, sound, and awareness, the pervasive kaya and wisdom display of the Buddhas. May practitioners of the profound and secret great perfection remain inseparable from the innermost, one-taste awareness of wisdom mind. Thanks, friends. And if you want to learn more about this, I did a big old fat book, Integral View of Tibetan Buddhism, Preserving Lineage Wisdom in the 21st Century. This particular part on upholding and all these ups, it's like, chapter 39, and the chapter's called Turquoise, World Shaping, the impulse to creatively support systems so they auto-enhance themselves. So I think this is Turquoise, World Shaping, with subchapters on upholding and the like. So thanks so much, friends. Awesome. Lovely to share some time. Thank you.